All right, folks, welcome to a special discussion today that is a collaboration between Care Patrol and the positive aging community. And we have really had some wonderful discussions in this series. And today is no exception. We're going to be talking about Parkinson's disease and why exercise is important. But before we do that, I want to bring on the Care Patrol team or Care Patrol team members to talk a little bit about Care Patrol, and then we're also going to get to meet a few folks, and then we'll kick off our discussion on Parkinson's disease. I want to remind you, though, before we learn about Care Patrol, that the best thing about these discussions is they're live and interactive. And so you can ask questions, you can make comments, you can share resources, and you do that one of three ways. You can use chat, you just introduce yourself. If you got a question, you type it in there. You can use the little Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in a question. And then if you prefer to verbally express yourself as opposed to typing it in, you can raise your little virtual hand. I'll open up your mic and you can ask a question. The important thing to know, though, is that you can sit back, relax, and enjoy the discussion today and participate as much or as little as you like, and not worry about your mic and camera coming on. The only way that would happen is if you gave me permission and I could turn it on. A couple of other things to know. This discussion is going to be recorded today along with all the chat. It'll be available at proaging.com. Also make sure that the Care Patrol folks get it so they could share it with you as well. So without further ado, I think we've got Rhonda, I believe, is going to tell us a little bit about Care Patrol first. So Rhonda, if you want to turn on your camera and mic, we'll get to meet you and learn a little bit about Care Patrol. Hey, Rhonda, thanks for doing this again. And and before I forget, let me hit the record button here. Yeah, because that. But Rhonda, you want to tell folks a little bit about Care Patrol, and I have a few slides for you guys.
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Steve, for the introduction. Care Patrol is a national company. We have about 180 franchises in 42 states. We serve Howard and Montgomery County. We help our families navigate through the housing process with finding assisted living, independent living, memory care, and in-home care services. We tour our clients much like a realtor does when they're showing a home. And the best part about it is our services are free, as we are compensated by the thousands of providers in our network. Care Patrol has 7 franchises in the DMV. And Steve has a slide that he will actually show. We cover Northern Virginia all the way to Baltimore. If you have a client that is in need of our services, you can please feel free to give us a call at 410-218-5588, as we will have a senior care consultant standing by. Now, I would like to say that we could definitely not do this without our sponsors. And I would like to introduce to you Dr. Hannah DeBong of Alta Healthcare Services.
Great. And Dr. Hannah, if you want to, there you go. Whoops. There we got you. So tell us a little bit about Alta Healthcare Services, Dr. Hannah. I've got your website here that I can share with folks because it really seems like a interesting service.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Ms. Rhonda, and I'm glad to be here today. Yes, my name is Hannah DeBonge, and I am the administrator of Alta Healthcare Services. We are located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and we serve Montgomery County, PG County, parts of Frederick County, and parts of Howard County. Well, as you know, the population right now is aging rapidly. And what does that come with? A lot of Parkinson's disease, dementia, Alzheimer's, and that leads to, in the end stages, behavioral issues. That's where we come in. We have caregivers who are dedicated, compassionate, and trained to recognize the symptoms and be able to help your loved ones stay where they want to be. So imagine you're working, you have to take care of your parents at home. There's no way to juggle that. Where do you tend to? Assisted living. But the assisted livings will not admit you either if you have behaviors, right? So that's where our caregivers come in. You tend to alter healthcare services, don't forget the name. And we would provide you with dedicated caregivers to help keep your loved ones in those facilities.
Wow, this is really cool. I love the fact that you're specializing on behavioral health issues, because I have not found that many agencies specifically focused on that. And man, when you talk to the families, you realize how challenging that is. So great service. And I dropped your website into chat so that people can check that out. I'll also drop your contact information, Dr. DeBong, in there as well. And let's see, Rhonda, I think that part of the sponsorship, thank you for that, is that we get a door prize, right?
Absolutely.
So everybody who's tuned in at the end of the discussion, you don't necessarily need to be present to win, but we'd like you to be present. And we're going to spin the famous wheel of names. This is always fun. And then what's on tap for the door prize today?
A gift card.
Okay, excellent. We can always, all of us can use those. So
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So thank you again, Dr. Hannah, for supporting this discussion today. And we look forward to connecting you with some of the folks in the audience. And Rhonda, I think now we're about to begin the show, right? With the, I think Kathy is going to come on and do the introductions.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my honor to introduce you to our first speaker of the program, Dawn Lewis. Dawn Lewis has been with the Parkinson's Foundation since 2019. Her role with them is to, as an advocate, is to raise awareness in the community of the foundation's mission. She's also to make sure that she's making the people understand that the purpose of the Parkinson Foundation is to make life better for those who have the disease, improve the caring, and advancing research towards the cure for Parkinson's. Dawn has had this commitment to helping seniors and those who are in need of help for all of her career life. And I admire her for her commitment and also for her dedication to serving the community. It is my honor to introduce all of you to Dawn Lewis, and it is a pleasure to say that she's a friend also. Dawn?
Well, thank you. You're getting me choked up already. Oh, what a wonderful, kind introduction. And I am so happy to be here. My history with Kathy goes way back, and even with Rhonda. They're two dear friends of mine. I came to the senior care organization, and I know with Welcoming Arms from Rhonda, and kind of grew up in healthcare. My background, though, it's interesting because I've started out in a nonprofit, which was AARP, but closely working with constituents, and I really had this yearning to really be a part of the community. So when I began working with people in the senior living community, I truly grew up in understanding the aging process. My background is in gerontology, so it was wonderful to connect the two. I worked with the Alzheimer's Association, so it seems like my career has been focusing on diseases of the brain, which has been extremely enlightening, helpful in my personal life and in the lives of others. So eventually I moved on to Parkinson's Foundation, and I was so honored to be asked to join the organization to form this new chapter within the Parkinson's community. And today I have two special people who I've been working with, and it's been a joy and a journey in learning about what they do. And I'm excited that they are here today to share it with you. There are so many things that we can do to talk about Parkinson's, but today we're going to focus on exercise as medicine and why it's important to move. So today joining me is Teresa Jackson, and she is an Aware and Care ambassador. She also is active in the community because when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's, she quickly realized that the awareness was not there. So not only has she worked with us to build awareness, but she has been doing things on her own with regard to a podcast and writing books. So I'm not going to steal her thunder, but she has lots of great things to share with you. Cheryl Watkins, she is a therapist, and she is also certified with Rocksteady Boxing. So she offers classes in her area as well. And she's going to talk more about the movement. I am an advocate. I don't have the medical background, and I don't have the training that I can speak well on in those areas. So I'm going to leave all that to Cheryl, and she's a dynamo as well. So I'd like to begin just sharing with you what the Parkinson's Foundation is all about. It's a national organization. So we're throughout the United States. And not only do we work with organizations, with universities, with hospitals on Parkinson's research, it's a global initiative as well. Our focus is providing care, in which we work closely with hospitals. We're associated with Georgetown University Hospital as well as Johns Hopkins. We consider them to be our centers of excellence because of the work that they do involving care in the community, as well as the research that they're currently involved in. And then we also offer resources in the community, and I'm going to share with you a little bit about that. It's so important that not only the Parkinson's Foundation be in the community, but others. There are many other nonprofits that offer services to people living with Parkinson's. And in order to make their life better, in order to give them what they need to live better, it's important that we share this information with them. I also just want to talk about a few facts that you may have heard of, and if you haven't, just to share them with you. We used to talk about that at least 60,000 new cases of Parkinson's was diagnosed each year. From recent research that the foundation has conducted, that number has changed. So we're looking at 90,000 new cases that are occurring yearly. And that's only what we've been able to identify through our research. So we're pretty sure that there's more people out there. Many people go undiagnosed for a long time because they may have a symptom outside of a tremor. We most associate Parkinson's with tremors, but that's not always the case. I recently met someone who was recently diagnosed. Tremors was not the symptom that made her go seek out care with a neurologist. Her symptom basically was the low voice, and she had noticed that over time her voice was getting lower. and people began to bring that to her attention. So again, because of that, because of lack of access to care, communities that we haven't been able to reach, we feel that that number will be growing. At least nearly 1 million people are living with Parkinson's, and then 10 million throughout the country. Also, the other point that I really want to stress is that the economic burden that can exist for somebody living with Parkinson's and their families, it's important that they be aware of the care and services that are out there, like Care Patrol and other home care agencies that we heard from Alta. But these come at a cost for some services, and that's why we are working along with Michael J. Fox to advocate on behalf of the community so that we can begin to identify additional funds through federal for research, and as well as compensation for medical treatments that they are responsible for. But we know there's no cure, and that's why it's so important that we have the treatments available, and that's why research will help get us there in order for them to improve the quality of life and have a lifestyle that they're most comfortable with. So today, there is so much you can talk about with regard to Parkinson's when it comes to treatments, when it comes to symptoms, when it comes to how it impacts a person from a lifestyle perspective. But one thing we do know through research that it's important that people do exercise and move to help slow down the progression of the disease. So we'll talk a little bit about the causes, and we'll talk about a little bit about motor and non-motor symptoms. But for today's presentation, it's going to be focused on move and helping people get motivated to do so. Most of us may know that Parkinson's disease is a progressive disorder that affects the brain and body. And we always, again, focus on motor symptoms, the gait, the ability to move, to coordinate movements, but also non-motor symptoms are affected by this as well. And what's causing the effect on the movement, the ability to move, is the decrease in the dopamine. And that's the chemical that controls the movement. So when it comes to producing this dopamine, if it's deficient, then that's going to cause difficulty with regard to movement, mood, motivation, and many other things. And what I'd also like to share with you is that, as I mentioned, there's no cure, but our emphasis today is going to be on lifestyle change. I was recently speaking with a spouse earlier in the week. She and her husband had traveled to Sweden, which they were doing so for their 40th anniversary. He has been living with Parkinson's for about 10 years. So she was sure that she had planned well enough to be able to make sure that the trip was enjoyable for the both of them. Once they've arrived, she realized there were certain things that she hadn't planned on, and therefore had to make those adjustments. But because she had done some preparation as far as, okay, while we may not be able to walk as far as we choose to when we're touring a particular site, she became creative and said, well, let me just film everything on those days in which my partner can't make those trips, because she wanted to make sure that while they were taking this trip, that he had as much enjoyment as possible, even though he may have been limited from a mobility issue. They still did their exercises. They were able to download information from previously recorded fitness videos, which also made a difference. And so that's why when it comes to a lifestyle choice, it's important to make sure that resources are out there and that they know that it exists. The next thing that I like to talk about is just that Parkinson's, we know, is sometimes referred to as a designer disease. I mentioned that not only are motor abilities affected, but also non-motor. And these are some of the things that many people don't think about. And here is a list of a few: bladder problems, speech problems, hallucinations, and I'm sure the doctor can speak to that. And that is truly a need. I know Steve alluded to it earlier. You don't hear as much about behavioral support or mental, emotional support as far as providers are concerned. So it's important that when dealing with a symptom like that, that you seek the help that you need in order to help you manage that symptom. With regard to the risk factors, it's been through research identified that generally people 60 plus are more affected by the disease. Men more than women are diagnosed with Parkinson's. We're seeing more younger onset being diagnosed, and so research is being continued to understand what symptoms are occurring there, especially for people who are younger. Family history, genetics plays a role in 5 to 10% of people that may be at risk for that particular gene. And then we were familiar with, of course, when Muhammad Ali was first diagnosed, most of the conversation surrounding that was, due to boxing, that his may have been attributed to head trauma. And now we're hearing more about Agent Orange and other pesticides. So again, that's proven that this could be a risk factor for people living with Parkinson's. The verdict isn't out yet. That's why research has continued, as well as the cause. We're not sure as to what the cause is. That's where much of the research is being done from a clinical perspective. And we also make sure that, we kind of shorten the time in which we identify these factors. So therefore, working with organizations like Michael J. Fox and internationally with organizations in England, we're able to not duplicate the efforts as far as what research has been done, and to combine the work so that we can get to a point where we can understand what genes are being affected. We've identified 7. 2 appear to be ones that we need to continue further studies on. And of course, what's going on in the environment. And when we're looking at alpha-synuclein, which is the protein that is also involved with the neurons and dopamine, we need to better understand what's going on in the brain. As I mentioned, research in genetics, gut and brain connection is something that there's been more and more discussion on, because we want to understand what's happening there. And then finally, as I mentioned, the environment, looking at pesticides, heavy metals, and things like that, to see what impact that has as far as people who are being diagnosed with Parkinson's. And treatment, with regard to treatment, we're most familiar with medication, the main medication that is prescribed for people who are living with Parkinson's. And at the time of diagnosis, there may be instances where it is not, and that is cinnamon, or sometimes referred to as carbidopa-levodopa. That tends to be a therapy that will help manage the tremors that one may be experiencing. And it requires a good regimen when you're taking this medication throughout the day, because you want to be able to avoid off periods, which means that that's when you're going to notice the tremors more frequently. So as the medication wears off, then tremors or any type of form of dyskinesia can occur. So it's a challenge to manage medication throughout the day. Surgical options. I've just shown an image of one, which is deep brain stimulation, in which there's a probe that's inserted through the brain. And then there's a device that's going to be placed just under the skin in the chest area so that treatment can be managed that way without hopefully having to take the medication to supplement it. And then finally, rehabilitation programs. There's programs for people with Parkinson's that they can take advantage of. LSVT, there's a new one called POWER. And that's something that Cheryl's going to discuss as we move forward in the presentation. So finally, that brings us to exercise. Exercise is one of the things that whenever someone is diagnosed, the movement specialist will encourage them to do that. It's been researched in at least 2.5 hours throughout the week is so important for them to exercise. There's so many different options that they have with regard to exercise, but exercise can help slow the progression. I've been to different Rocksteady boxing classes, and I've heard many stories from people who have participated that when they may have first started, they were in a wheelchair, they were very weak, and after about 6 to 8 months, there was a tremendous change and improvement in their ability to become more mobile. I recently visited Asbury, and it was really great to hear about their program that they offer, their brain health program. There's a program that they offer for people with Parkinson's, with Rocksteady boxing, and some other classes such as dance for PD, and then cycling. And then finally, we all know the benefits, whether you have Parkinson's or not. If you've gone to any doctor, doctors also may stress you need to exercise, you need to keep moving, because not only does it help us from a physical perspective, whether it's balance, mobility, strength, or endurance, the benefits from a non-motor skill perspective. I know that if I go out and exercise and afterwards, my mood changes. I have more energy. I'm ready to do something else instead of maybe going home and resting. And also from a cognitive perspective, it helps, clear our way of thinking, and we're able to function much better. But when it does come to exercise, it's a matter of doing things that you enjoy. The Parkinson's Foundation has a program called PD Health at Home, where on Fridays, it's called Friday Fitness. There's always a live fitness therapist who is going to be leading an exercise, whether it's focused on gait, whether it's focused on aerobics, but it's something that people can take advantage of at no cost. Even when it isn't live, you can always pull it up because there's a huge library of different fitness. So that's one way we encourage people who don't want to leave the house to just go on their computer, bring up the video and watch it, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night. But remember, safety first. So again, these are some suggestions on exercises that you can do. There's many, many more that you can do just sitting in your chair. But again, it's so important that you start moving. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Teresa. As I said, she does a fantastic job in being out there in the community and making a difference. So Teresa, you're on, and I know that they're going to find your story so exciting.
Well, thank you. A life worth living. I know that anyone that has received a diagnosis of Parkinson's may have pondered that question. I was diagnosed in February of 2019 with Parkinson's disease. At the time of my diagnosis, I did not receive any education. I do have some slight, there we go. I did not receive any education on my diagnosis, my prognosis. No one shared with me about exercise. And so really I was left to ponder, what is my life going to look like in the near future? I had changed jobs just before my diagnosis. My husband was in Afghanistan, and I was alone. Our kids were empty nesters, and so I was alone, and I felt like I was very much alone. Because I didn't receive education from my physician at the time of my diagnosis, it really prompted me to start researching how was I going to live with this disease. And that question may resonate with many of you, wondering after newly diagnosed, if you still have a life worth living. I knew that I needed to come to my terms with my diagnosis. We can go to that next. This should be the next one. I knew that I needed to come to terms with my diagnosis. And so I really began to work on figuring that out. You might wonder, well, what's the secret sauce? And in my personal opinion, I think that it's the ability to reconcile the life that you want with the life that you have. So the life that you thought you were going to have with the life of this is what's left after Parkinson's diagnosis can be pretty difficult. That ability to reconcile that ability to allow yourself to express what you feel and be transformed by experiences helps get to a point of acceptance. And that acceptance, once you have that acceptance, and I will say that it can wander day to day. You know, some days you think, okay, I got this, I've accepted it, I'm doing good. And the next day you may think that you haven't. But when you get to that point of acceptance or some level of acceptance, I think you go through a grieving process. And at that point, that helps you increase your resiliency, and it helps you develop post-growth thought processes. So part of this is just finding the good in your life, because when you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, it's fairly overwhelming, and you may think there is no good left in your life, but the truth is that there is always good in our life, but we have to find that, right? We have to keep in mind also that there are lots of pieces to the puzzle. We need a good movement disorder specialist or a good neurologist. And we need to have good nutrition. And as the focus of most of this program today is, we need to exercise. And I think it was Dawn that mentioned we need to treat exercise like medicine. It needs to be our priority. Can we move to the next slide, maybe? Thank you. I'm not able to see all of the slides, so I was only seeing part of that first one. So for me, when I was diagnosed, I took about 2 months, and I think I just felt sorry for myself. I wasn't sure if I had any quality of life left or what it was going to look like for me. And I took about 2 months and really just felt sorry for myself. But after about 2 months, I decided that that's not what my life was going to look like, that I was still young and that I had a lot of life left. And so I made the decision to start doing advocacy work. The first thing I did was develop a program. It was called Parkinson's Pathway Pals. And I meet with people pro bono. It never costs them anything, that are newly diagnosed with Parkinson's. And through those discussions, we try to find what a new normal might look like for that person. The next thing that I did was I actually competed in Mrs. Virginia. And when my sister brought that idea to me, the first thing I guess that I thought was she had lost her mind. I was in my 50s, and the people that were competing for Mrs. Virginia were in their 20s, 30s, and some in their early 40s. And so it was a bit daunting. But the one thing reason I mentioned this piece of my advocacy work was because the thing that I had to do to get prepared for that, if you'll notice, I'm in 5-inch heels, and I had terrible balance issues when I was first diagnosed. So I had to exercise a lot in order to keep my balance. And of course, medication was part of that, but it wasn't all of it. That opportunity was like a ripple effect. When you put a pebble out into the water, I developed other relationships which allowed and led to other things that were very helpful. I was featured in a documentary called A Night of Inspiration, featured on CBS out of Richmond. And the reason I was featured there was because of Mrs. Virginia, but then I was also interviewed again because of a fundraiser I did where I rode my bicycle across the state of Virginia. I authored a book, Thriving with Parkinson's, Finding Joy After the Diagnosis, and there is joy after the diagnosis if you look for it. I started a podcast. My podcast is Parkinson's Pathway Pals, Tuesdays with Teresa. You can find it on any podcast avenue that you normally would get podcasts from. And we're in 73 countries. I'm not sure how that happened. I don't know that much about podcasting, but I know about building relationships with people and help educating people on things that they need. I became an Aware and Care ambassador for the Parkinson's Foundation, which is very important work on helping keep people safe when they have hospitalizations. And then the most recent was that I was featured in AARP along with 2 other people, what living with Parkinson's feels like. So what my advocacy work did for me was that it gave me a purpose. And researchers have noted that there's an association between life purpose and mortality in the US among adults older than 50. Purpose has proven to be more indicative of longevity than your gender, your race, or even your education level, which was that is fascinating research to me, but it's more indicative of longevity, your purpose in life. And my mother passed last year when she was 91, but she had a purpose in life. She had a food mission, and she would take food to people that were not well. So she had a purpose in life, and it really, I think, helped her quality of life. Purpose is also more important for decreasing our risk in death than drinking, smoking, or regular exercise. And I'm a big proponent for regular exercise, but purpose is very important. We could go to slide 3. So what we focus on changes the way we think. It impacts our quality of life, and it gives us opportunities to build resiliency and what we focus on, our purpose and resiliency, it's all connected to our quality of life. And if we're not very resilient, we may not exercise. And if we don't exercise, we may not be resilient. So it's all connected together. What we focus on changes the way we think. And let me give you a quick example. In 2018, I bought a white Subaru. And prior to that, I don't think I'd ever even noticed a white Subaru on the road. But all of a sudden, I was seeing all these white Subarus as I would go from one place to the next. And, you know, you think, well, were there more Subarus on the road? Probably not. My focus changed. I now had a white Subaru, and I would notice. So my awareness changed at that time. So focus helps us build resiliency, and that is really important. Although resiliency is seldom associated with older adults, you think of resiliency of maybe that 30-year-old football player or the 25-year-old athlete that's a marathon runner. We don't normally or frequently associate it with older adults, but older adults actually have higher subjective well-being or thoughts of levels. They think of themselves with higher well-being than individual in any other age group. Now, while subjective is our own opinion, it matters, it counts. Because if you think about, I have friends that that are much more progressed in their disease and struggle physically much more than I do, but their well-being and their quality of life is good. They feel like they have a good life. So resiliency is, in fact, associated with older adults. Resilience thinking in older adults gives us the ability to recover from adversity and thrive under sustained situations. You think about, we have a lot of chronic situations and we lose our friends as we age. There's a lot of things that are very stressful. And so resiliency helps us cope much better with those things that come along in our life as we age. The good news is that it's a regenerative capacity, so it renews itself, and it helps us maintain our health functions as we face loss, disability, or disease. Despite losses of physical decline, older adults report feeling content, and I think that's that subjective piece of the puzzle. We can assess resiliency by asking questions such as, why do you think you've lived so long? For someone that's older, like my mother, who passed at 91, how would you describe your relationships with your family and your friends? What do you do when you have difficulties? So we can assess how resilient we are by asking ourselves those types of questions. You might be curious, how do we acquire resiliency? You can go to the next slide, please. We're not born with it, as I mentioned, so it's a learnable skill, which is really good news, because if you're born with it and you happen to be the person that's not born with it and it wasn't a learnable or a renewable skill, that'd be pretty tough. But it is a learnable and a renewable skill. It's produced through the interaction of biological systems and protective factors in the social environment. And the social environment is, our family, it's our friends, it's the people we worship with, it's the people we exercise with, right? And people with resiliency, as I mentioned, live longer. And part of that is that social component of, maybe we're in a group exercise class like Rock Steady. That social component's really important. People that are isolated without social connectivity of any type, that's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's the toll it takes on your body. So exercise and social connectivity are really quite important. I mentioned the active ingredient for building resilience are relationships, and it really has to do with that perception or that subjective view. It has less to do with the severity of our disease itself. Next slide. There's 3 hallmarks of resiliency, and that's recovery, sustained purpose, and growth. And I think recovery is kind of self-explanatory. Sustained purpose is self-explanatory. But when we talk about growth, we talk about post-growth theory is what I think about. And that's that ability to take something that was very, very weak and to make it stronger. So after that crisis, you become stronger. Let's go to the next slide if we could. So there's a lot of different types of exercise that I do personally. I cycle, I do aerial yoga, I do ballet, I rock climb, I do rock steady, I do water aerobics, I do mainstream classes at my wellness center, like body pump. But the thing about exercise is that you just have to find what you enjoy. Maybe it's, cycling, get you an e-bike if that's within your means. Find a group of people to do it with, find what you like, and do it consistently. Your exercise may look very different than my exercise. but do exercise. For instance, you know, I at one point was taking ballet after I was diagnosed, and ballet is good for your cognitive because our teacher would call out different steps. It's good for our balance. It's good for core strength. And I had different purposes for being in that class than the 25-year-old adult ballet student beside me. She was trying to learn to do a pirouette, and I was trying to stay out of a wheelchair. But the thing is, it has great ability to keep us on our feet. So I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts, and it's find your purpose, find your tribe, and you'll find your happiness. I want to very quickly talk about, I'm on the board of directors of an organization called Upending Parkinson's, and it's a nonprofit that works with people through rock climbing. And my first exercise that I did was rock steady. I still do rock steady 5 years after my diagnosis now, and it has been extremely helpful, but I'm not going to talk a lot about that today since we have a speaker that is. But I did want to mention the rock climbing because a lot of people may think I could never rock climb. But as Cheryl mentioned, people that sometimes are in a wheelchair are able to get up and begin walking, whether that's assisted or unassisted. I have seen with my own eyes witnessed the same thing. People begin in their wheelchair or walkers, and after climbing for several times, they gain strength. And rock climbing, rock climbing, thank you. Rock climbing is a cognitive load. You have to think about where you're going next. There's a cardio because you're kind of breathless when you get to the top, and there's certainly a strength. So I'm going to hop off here. I've probably taken longer than what I should. I apologize if I did. If anyone's interested, we are doing a research with Upending. If you're interested in being part of that, please either reach out to Steve or to Dawn, or you can reach me at Teresa Jackson at teresajackson.org. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Teresa. That's fantastic. And I always enjoy hearing your story each time, especially, you know, you competing and standing in those 6-inch heels. Now, at this time, I'd like to introduce Cheryl Watkins. Cheryl Watkins is an awesome young woman who has been dedicating her life and committing her time to getting those with Parkinson's to exercise. I'm going to let her share her story with you and what she does to keep people with Parkinson's active.
Hi, thank you. You guys can hear me okay? Yes. All right. My name is Cheryl Watkins. I'm a licensed occupational therapist. And real quick, just thank you to Steve and Don for inviting me. And Teresa, what an inspiring story. To build resilience through a diagnosis is the goal, right? So a little bit about myself. You can go to the next slide, Don. Try not to talk too fast. I usually talk pretty fast, but rock steady boxing. So I kind of went through me. I think the first slide, you can go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So again, we kind of briefly went over the neurological piece of Parkinson's and how many people are living right now in the United States with it. And that number seems to be increasing, unfortunately. You know, there are medications to really kind of work on the symptoms, other treatments, deep brain stimulation surgery. But, you know, exercise right now has been proven and continues to be the only thing that actually slows the progression. And, you know, more research that's coming out actually shows that it can actually change your trajectory of how the disease progresses. And there is no cure. Go to the next slide. Good. So exercise is medicine. Dawn and Teresa just spoke on that briefly. But when people come in and meet me for the first time, I always say consider medicine as a pill in your box. You never would miss a pill for your diagnosis or your disease. Medicine should be considered the same way, or exercise should be considered the same way. And the reason for that is because exercise can slow the progression of the disease. So we really want to slow it down. the intensity of the exercise actually helps produce dopamine. And as mentioned, it is the decrease in dopamine that makes the movement difficult for those living with Parkinson's. Next slide. So how did Rocksteady start? So our founder, Scott Newman, was diagnosed out in Indianapolis. He was a prosecutor. And when he found out that he was diagnosed at the age of 39, there were really, I think this is back early 2000s when he was diagnosed. He said, you know, well, if I'm going to have a moving disorder, I better start moving. And so he linked up with a local kind of a professional boxer there and started moving and was starting to see improvements in his ability to move. Now, I should also mention that Rocksteady Boxing is a non-contact program, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But just keep in mind, you know, that this was all the prep work for a boxer that he was doing to get into the ring and not necessarily taking any blows to the head. But he was actually really seeing improvement. And so they, you know, with his resources, decided to create a nonprofit called Rocksteady Boxing. And at that time was isolated to the Indianapolis area. Next slide, please. So founded in 2006 was the first class, started with 6 boxer, and that's Christy Rose. She was the professional boxer that started the boxing program out in Indianapolis. They met 5 classes per week. Original onset was for young onset Parkinson's. Next slide. And boxing became very popular. So since 2006 now, that should say probably thousands of boxers. This is an old slide, but that is a current number, 820 affiliates in 50 states and 15 countries. So boxing has steadily become more and more popular and an efficient way to manage and even slow people's Parkinson's disease. Next slide. And so as Teresa mentioned, she really hit on some of the things that I originally see when I see people for the first time in our gym. You know, when someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's, feelings of anxiety, depression, fear, and isolation, helplessness, you know, and these are all things that are experienced as a result of the diagnosis, but can also be, you know, exacerbated by the inefficient of dopamine too. So some of it may be also made worse because of the dopamine not being appropriately produced by the brain. Next slide. So the idea of Rocksteady was to intervene at the day of diagnosis. We were, once it became so popular, there's been like boots on ground kind of effort to get into these neurologists, doctors' offices, because like Teresa, there were so many people going home with very little to no information on what to do. So to make it very simple, we said, come to the boxing gym, let them know what we're doing. And after educating the doctors that this was a non-contact program, they were very, very willing to go ahead and give that prescription for Rocksteady Boxing. And, you know, the idea for the boxing is that, you know, it's not a clinical environment where, you know, I'm a licensed occupational therapist and, you know, it's not another doctor's office that you have to go to get your exercise or doctor's visit. So I understand how that may feel a little bit more appealing than, you know, going to a therapy office. You know, you're immediately embraced by people that understand your diagnosis, understand how you felt the first time that you were diagnosed. You immediately have a sense of community, and we are always celebrating the small stuff in our gym. Next slide. So there is science behind the exercise, right? I think this one was probably the most prominent that identified why the intensity of the exercise was really helping those. This was a tandem cycle Cleveland Clinic study where individuals were biking 3 times a week for 8 weeks, some at a voluntary pace and others at a forced intense rate where they were tandem and tagged with someone, and they were noticing people's balance and walking speed had improved after a few weeks of doing these forced intense exercise. So, and then the research just continues to support exercise. Next slide, please. So why do we box, you say? So many people think of, Muhammad Ali, Parkinson's, again, non-contact, but unless you've taken a fitness boxing class, you may not realize all the things that go into boxing in order for a boxer to be prepared for a fight, right? So it's not a team fight, you're not fighting with someone. You can't offset when you mess up. You really have to be on your game during that entire 2 minutes when you're in a boxing match. So if you go to the next slide, Don, excuse me. Oh, so there was another slide that's not here, but it really broke down the 2 symptoms versus the boxing. And so essentially when you're working on your boxing stance, you're working on balance. When you're working coordination, you're hitting targets. When you're working on how intense you need to move, many people, when they first hit a boxing bag, don't realize how little their energy is expended when they first hit the bag. They're like, oh, that didn't really do much of anything. They want to hear that punch, right? So you immediately get that feedback, that biofeedback that's going to give you that, okay, I just hit big, right? Moving around the ring requires a lot of footwork and balance. And in order to do that appropriately, you need to be able to understand how to move safely. And a lot of the movement that happens in a ring prevents the boxer from falling down. Right? And that is what we want. We want fall prevention. We want to learn how to move appropriately and keep ourselves upright. So a lot of the skills required for boxing really translates into real life to keep people keeping their core strength, keeping their eye-hand coordination right, keeping their footwork right, keeping that intensity, and of course, having that camaraderie of your class members. And as a licensed occupational therapist, I did have to mention that Rocksteady is not necessarily a substitute for any physical or occupational or speech therapy. In the past, when I first graduated as a student back in 2007, we were still thinking movement wasn't the answer, even though the studies were starting to prove it, right? As OTs, we were like, no, sit down, be careful, don't move, right? And now slowly these studies are kind of justifying the movement, and therapy has caught up, and now therapy has created wellness programs as well. And many times when individuals come to my gym, I sometimes say, do these programs first. Get one-on-one therapy that can be covered by insurance, and then come to us, because you get that confidence a little bit more by doing that before coming into a boxing gym, which can be intimidating. So some of those programs that are out there are called LSVT Big, which is a big movement type of specialized program covered by either an occupational or physical therapist. And if you're newly diagnosed, I suggest you can easily find a therapist that is certified in this program called LSV, going to the website lsvt.org. They also work on voice activation and another program called Loud. And these exercises can really help for those that are having a hard time with projecting their voice, learning how to speak appropriately. And many of those that are living with Parkinson's will know very quickly what I'm talking about with the speech being a little bit softer. And so next slide. I'm kind of making sure we kind of stay within the time. Yeah. So I think that was the end of my slides, but I didn't know if we wanted to still do a demonstration of the boxing or just jump to questions. I wanted to be mindful of the time.
I think it would be cool if you do a quick demo of the boxing.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Normally I was hoping to, be filming from my gym, but my daughter's homesick, so she was downstairs. But this is my COVID workout area. This is where we did our virtual classes. We offer at Rock Steady Boxing in Rockville, Maryland. We continue to offer virtual classes. We offer seated and standing. So for those that may not be able to walk quite yet, we do a virtual seated class, and we do an standing upright class. So we have, at our program, we have everything. Every individual Rock Steady Boxing might be a little different. But welcome to my virtual home. So everyone, I want everyone, if you're sitting up in a chair, maybe get some room to like spread your arms around and sit up nice and tall. I want your legs to be as wide as your chair. And I usually love to start with just some nice deep breathing to kind of shift us into a little bit of what we were thinking about and get over that, and then really focus on being present and ready to move. So these are just a few exercises that I like to do. We'll do a quick stretch, get right into the boxing, and then answer some questions. So first, nice big deep breath in through your nose and out. 2 more times. Deep breath in and out. 1 last time. Deep breath in and out. Good. And now we're going to start with some big reaching, which is very similar to what you might see in some power workouts or big workouts. And you're going to do a nice big reach forward and then bring it back. Nice big reach forward and back. Reach forward, back. Reach forward and back. Let's take this reach up and down, up, down, up, down, up, down. All right, let's get the heart rate moving a little bit, and obviously move with whatever your physician has told you to move appropriately. But for now, I want you guys to reach up with one hand and bring the opposite knee up into a high knee, and then you're going to switch, 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 and then try to increase the speed if you can. Right? So just kind of like this big march in your chair. We'll keep it here for a few seconds, working on getting that heart rate up and getting your legs moving big. Good. And then let's start some boxing. So go ahead and sit up nice and tall in your chair. You're going to bring your hands up to your face, ideally in a nice little fist. You're going to keep those hands by your face. This is where you come back to protecting your face, right? And I always say, if you were ever to fall, bringing your arms up to your head is the best way to protect your head. So this is good patterns that we're developing in boxing. Let's just do some straight punches. You're going to do a jab, cross, jab, cross. Now, in boxing, it's never just the arms, right? You're using your whole body to get behind the punch. So you're kind of pushing through your hips and extending that arm, because the power, your arms are not very strong, but your legs, your core, everything else is much stronger. So pushing that momentum behind those straight punches. Let's keep it here for about 20 seconds. Jab, cross, jab, cross, jab, cross. A little weight shifting back and forth in your chair. Good. And then let's throw some hooks. So with the hook, you're getting that elbow up as high as your shoulder. Then the other side, hook, hook, hook. I'm doing a nice big twist in the torso, pushing down through my feet. Hook, 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 hook. And then uppercuts up the middle, right here. Hands are always coming back to the face. Hook, uppercut, 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 uppercut. Keeping it here for a few times. Good. And then this is where the cognitive piece can come into play. When we start combining these different combinations, you really have to think about your next move. What is your current move? So we're going to do a jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut. So it's a straight, straight punch, hook, uppercut. Alternating sides, jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Good. How fast can you do that? Let's do that in number 10 seconds. Jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut. One more time. Jab, jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Whew! All right. We can stop here and take a nice deep breath in and out. That was a quick, 2-minute rock steady boxing demo there for you guys. Happy to answer any questions.
That was pretty cool. Actually, Monique, and I think you answered the question, but in your demo there, as Monique was wondering, would rock steady boxing still be beneficial to those who are unable to stand and are wheelchair bound, but have pretty good upper body strength? But I was kind of surprised that you did that seated.
Yeah.
And is a lot of the exercises in rock steady seated?
No. It varies on the program. Every affiliate kind of works differently. And you can always go to the rocksteadyboxing.org website. There's usually, I think they just updated their website. So they have like the alphabet. You click the name of your city that your letter starts with, and you can find the affiliate that is closest to you. And I advise you call them and see what levels they offer. The one in Rockville, Maryland that we offer a higher level and a modified level. So with that modified level, we're doing seated and sometimes getting ups. We do have people that use walkers. We've had people do the wheelchair bound and do a lot of these exercises. And as a therapist, I'm able to throw out modifications if they are certain types of exercises they can't do. We'll modify it so that they can do it. But with our high level class, for those that really need that intensity, you'll see people getting down to the floor, doing stretches, coming back up. One thing that the Parkinson's Foundation has kind of put together was the recommendation of how much exercise that you need in the combination. And that was about 150 minutes, I believe, of exercise. And in it talked about strength, flexibility, balance, dual tasking. And what's really nice about the rock steady boxing is that we capture a lot of that in like that 1 hour. So yeah, it's sometimes a great place to start if you're armed with all the information out there.
Well, the other thing that Teresa had mentioned about finding your tribe, I imagine whether it's online or in person at the gym, that there's a lot of great connections being made between the people in the classes.
Absolutely. And with our, at least with our class, the Zoom classes, it is a live Zoom class. Most of the people keep their cameras on. I'm still correcting and, adjusting live during the classes, and we get to talk a few minutes beforehand. Many of the rock steadies will, incorporate social events, and I do that with our program, going out and doing different things. In April is Parkinson Awareness Month. We did a talent show at the gym. There's definitely, you're still getting that social aspect, even though it's virtual.
I love it. Okay, let's see. Well, I would say that if any of our Dawn or any of our panel members have any sort of closing thoughts or things that you wanted to share that you didn't share, let's do that now. And just remind folks that are on, this is recorded so you can share it, but also if you've got questions, feel free to jump in. And as we kind of close out this session, this was another really good one. I certainly learned a lot.
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes,
if you
it
could
was.
just
Steve,
take. one more thing, Rhonda. Cheryl, if you can just take a moment to focus on the voice aspect when you're doing Rocksteady Boxing or any of the other ones, with the
Yes.
importance behind it.
Yeah. So, well, at least in the boxing classes, we will encourage people to count out loud or work on their speech. But over time with Parkinson's, as everything kind of slows, speech is incorporated in that. So it's a multi-system disease. So you may not think that speech is going to be incorporated, but it is. So many people with Parkinson's may have a very soft voice or a very slow voice. And as a speech, not as a speech, but knowing what speech language pathologists can do, they can work on exercises where you actually, it seems like you're singing, right? You're working on different chords and different lengths and holding loud pitches so that over time, and I think a lot of people, even just after 2 weeks of that program, it's usually the people around them are like, oh my gosh, I can hear you so much better. And many times that is just such a rewarding feeling. And you can go home with a set of exercises, but I would say we do incorporate some of that stuff in Rocksteady, but if that is something that you are experiencing or know someone, know that there is treatment for that, and it's typically covered by insurance. So definitely talk to your doctor about getting a prescription for speech therapy if that's something you need.
Wow.
Question about Rocksteady and how much it costs. And because you can, I mean, based on your demonstration, this has clearly got these healthcare benefits to it. Are there does insurance cover some of this, or how does that work?
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't. I will say what people have been successfully doing is if they have a health savings account, they've been able to get that as a, they're able to use that to make payments for the gym. If they have any wellness type of benefits, some people offer reimbursement for a gym membership. You can definitely justify that. Because this is a group setting and there's such a variance in how people present, and it can be very difficult to get something like this covered by insurance, right? So this is unfortunately an out-of-pocket.
All right. No, great.
Wow.
Okay.
This has been amazing, absolutely amazing. I would like to thank Dawn and Teresa and Cheryl for all the information that they have shared with us today. I would like to thank Steve for his support as our moderator. None of this could be possible without you, Steve. We thank you so very much. We really appreciate the partnership with Positive Aging. I'd like to thank our team. And I was just informed that we actually have 2 gifts to give away today.
Oh, okay, great.
So, yes,
I put Alta up there. That's your sponsor this month. But all right, we got 2 gifts. So I always like pulling up the wheel of names. This just cracks me up. It's really fun here. So let's see who gets to win the first prize then.
This is the fun part.
Yeah. And it's Deborah Miller. Okay, so Deborah Miller is the first winner. And then our second winner is going to be Tanika Jefferson. So we will make sure to get those email addresses for both of those folks, and they will get their prizes, their gift cards. All right. Any other closing remarks? I think this was really good. Awesome job, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to close by saying that we really appreciate the sponsors that we've had throughout this education series. Hawkeye, MedTech, Lizabelli Med Spa, Alta Healthcare. Thank you so very much for your support. in our also PRA investments. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
All right. All right, folks, we'll see you at the next one. Thanks a lot, and thanks for sharing such great information.
Thank you.